Imagine that suddenly your life changes in a single day. The question is, what happens to people after moments that change everything? Some disappear completely as if they had erased their own names from the collective memory. Others reappear in unexpected forms, reconstructed, almost unrecognizable. And then there are those who choose absolute silence, leaving only traces and unanswered questions. Have you ever thought about what it would be like if this happened to you? What would you do if suddenly your life was exposed, judged, or the target of eyes you never asked for? This is the part no one tells you. It's not enough to fall. You have to learn to deal with what happens afterward. The scene opens amidst a deafening din of flashbulbs, headlines, and loud commentary that cuts deeper than any silence. It is in this chaos that many are lost. Some disappear from the spotlight as if escaping an invisible prison. Others return, transformed but bearing scars unseen. And the question remains, can everyone truly return? Have you ever noticed that after a major scandal there's always this blind spot? A hole in the narrative that doesn't show up in the news. The headlines tell the immediate impact, but what comes after, nobody shows. It's in this aftermath that the most human side is hidden, the part that reveals who we truly are when everything falls apart. What you're about to discover may surprise you because we're not just talking about familiar names or distant stories. We're talking about something that touches everyone, the ability to reinvent yourself, or to lose yourself forever. Perhaps you've experienced this firsthand. A mistake, a failure, a day when everything turned against you. Have you ever experienced this? It's at this point that the narrative shifts, creating a fine line between falling and beginning again. Some people choose invisibility, others defy the world to prove they're still standing. But there's also that silent group, never seen again, living in a limbo that's almost more disturbing than any return. Now take a deep breath and imagine yourself in this scenario. You're facing your own collapse. The phone won't stop ringing, messages are flying in every direction, doors that were once open are slammed shut. And you standing still trying to decide, run, face or disappear. This is the fork in the road that defines destinies. And here comes the psychological blow. The fall may be public, but the aftermath is always lonely. The whole world can watch your life crumble, but only you feel the weight of the silence that follows. It is in this silence that many lose themselves. Others find a new identity. But no one emerges unscathed. It's strange to think that stories that seemed closed continue to live on, breathing beneath the ashes. It's as if there's a second, hidden life, a subterranean version of what the world believes is already over. And perhaps it's precisely there, in this subterranean realm, that the most disturbing part lies. Nothing truly ends. Today we're going to explore destinations no one could have imagined. And what you're about to hear could change the way you see not only these stories but also yourself. Because deep down we all carry invisible scars. And perhaps by discovering what happens to them, you'll also discover what happens to you. Now we move on to the first of these paths, and I need to warn you, it's nothing like you imagine. And before I delve deeper into this spiral of stories no one dares tell, I need to open a parenthesis with you who are here now listening to me. Because if you've reached this point, it's because you feel the same strange attraction to silence, to secrets, to destinies that are never fully revealed. And that's precisely why your presence matters. This channel only continues to exist because people like you decide to stay, decide to subscribe and walk along this dark corridor where each video opens another door. When you subscribe, you're not just a number on the screen. It's like lighting a candle in this maze. It's what allows me to continue bringing these stories that most would rather bury. Have you ever stopped to think that by clicking subscribe, you're guaranteed not to miss the next piece of this puzzle? Even denser, more disturbing stories that can't fit into a single night. Because what's coming is even stranger than you imagine. So, if this video has already captivated you, don't miss it. Press the button now. Be part of this circle of no return. With each new subscriber, this place grows stronger. And the stronger it is, the deeper we can go. And now breathe. Because the next story begins right here, where the silence seems to scream louder than any words. He was at his peak. Recognized, applauded, seen as untouchable. His image shown on magazine covers, television shows, and interviews, where every word was received as absolute truth. But what no one knew was that, behind the cameras, a weight was silently growing. A weight that didn't show in his rehearsed smiles or inspiring speeches. It was the distance between what he portrayed and what he truly lived. This fissure, invisible to the public eye, was the crack that would sooner or later open. Everything changed in a matter of days. What was once admiration turned to distrust. What was once applause turned to judgment. An unexpected scandal, a hidden truth that emerged from behind the scenes, tearing apart the perfect narrative he had constructed. And then, suddenly, the man everyone wanted to listen to became the one everyone wanted to stay away from. The impact was immediate, overwhelming. Big headlines, hasty analyses, endless speculation. And at the center of it all, his silence. Imagine being caught in that crossfire. One wrong decision, one secret revealed, and suddenly everything you've built begins to crumble in front of millions. It's as if your identity is being ripped away in public in front of people who don't really know you, but who now believe they know every detail of your soul. This is the cruelty of the fall. It never happens alone, it always happens under hungry eyes. He chose to disappear. After the first suffocating interviews, the cameras at his door, the pressure that left him gasping for air, he decided to withdraw. No clear explanation, no attempt to clean up his image. Just disappearance. The streets that once greeted him with smiles were now avoided. The places I used to frequent were left behind. As if he had chosen to live in voluntary exile, far from everything and everyone. And it's at this point that the story becomes most disturbing. Because when someone disappears from the public eye, silence doesn't erase doubt. On the contrary, it fuels it even more. His disappearance didn't bring peace, it brought mystery. Where is he? What really happened? Is there regret or just strategy? The questions echoed in forums, columns, and bar conversations. No one had an answer, and perhaps that's what keeps his figure alive to this day, his absence. Have you ever noticed how, in some situations, absence is more powerful than presence? When someone disappears, imagination works more than any fact. That's where true transformation lies. Not the one that happens within the person, but the one that happens in the minds of those who observe. Suddenly, everyone becomes the author of different versions of the same story. Some believe he isolated himself to find peace. Others say he could never bear the shame. Some even argue that he planned it all, that his departure was just the beginning of an even greater new narrative. But what is the truth? We may never know. And perhaps that's precisely the point. Hidden truths have the power to corrode and fascinate at the same time. Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever seen someone suddenly disappear from your life, leaving a void full of questions? The effect is the same. It's not what's said but what's never said that keeps echoing. His fate has become a modern myth. Between fragmented revelations, rumors, and theories, his image has become increasingly distant from reality and transformed into something almost intangible. A ghost of his own success, present only in memory and debate. This complete separation has created a character even more enigmatic than the man he was when he was on the scene. And it's at this point that the tension mounts. Because this story isn't unique. This was just the first turning point. Others followed different paths. While some disappeared silently, others chose to face everything head-on, defy the opposing tide, and try to rebuild what seemed irrecoverable. And this is where the spiral deepens, because each decision, to flee or to face, reveals not only the mindset of those who lived through the collapse, but also how we, on the outside, react to the downfalls. And the question remains, when the world falls apart, which path would you choose? Absolute silence that fuels mystery, or raw exposure that attempts to show a new side of the same story? And so, between fated presences and unexpected returns, we continue to delve behind the scenes of destinies that never followed a predictable logic, where each revelation opens space for a new doubt, and each answer always seems to hide something even greater. While some remain silent forever, others find new voices. The difference lies not only in the scandal itself, but in how each person chooses to face their downfall. Some choose absolute silence, becoming shadows, and others see their own collapse as a chance to begin again, even if, in the eyes of the public, this seems impossible. The line between ruin and rebirth is never clear, and perhaps that's why certain stories have an even greater impact than the scandal that spawned them. There was one case in particular that illustrates this shift in an almost cinematic way. He too was in the spotlight when it all began. A young, charismatic, and promising politician, people believed he represented a new mindset, a transformation that would bring freshness to the already worn-out scene. His words were powerful, his presence behind the scenes was respected, and the spotlight followed him as if the future were inevitably his. But, as happens when the hidden truth emerges, what seemed solid began to crack. Serious accusations. Scandals involving poorly explained decisions. Leaked documents. Harsh headlines that placed him at the center of a storm. The impact was immediate. Lawsuits, investigations, and trials were broadcast as a spectacle. What had once been hope turned to distrust. The name that symbolized the future now seemed doomed to oblivion. He lost positions, lost credibility, lost ground. And for many he was already finished. But what's surprising is that, instead of retreating into silence, he did the opposite. He chose to confront it. He appeared in interviews, faced questions that would destroy anyone, and revealed behind-the-scenes details that most would prefer to hide. It wasn't about denying mistakes or feigning absolute innocence, but something bolder, turning the collapse into a stage. With each revelation, he relinquished a part of his own image, as if willing to burn it all to rise from the ashes. Time passed, the processes dragged on, public opinion wavered. And gradually, against all expectations, he reappeared in spaces many believed were closed forever. He returned to speaking at events, writing and being heard. Not with the same brilliance as at first, but with a new voice shaped by the abyss itself. What seemed like a sentence became a reinvention. It's curious how some falls, instead of killing, act as triggers for a second life. Have you ever noticed this? People who have lost everything suddenly seem stronger, sharper, as if the pain has honed something that was previously hidden. Perhaps because, faced with total loss, there is nothing left to fear. Transformation happens when shame stops being a prison and becomes fuel. Of course, not everyone believed in this change. For some, his return will always be marked by the stain of the past. But for others, this very past is what makes him more human, more real, less perfect. And this contrast fuels the controversy. Was he an example of resilience or just someone who learned to manipulate the narrative? The hidden truth may never be fully revealed. What matters is that his story didn't end with the scandal. He reinvented himself through it. And here lies something uncomfortable yet inevitable. Our fascination lies not only in the rise or the fall, but in how each person deals with the consequences. Because the show isn't just about watching someone shine or someone else fall. What's truly captivating is seeing what remains after the fall. What decisions are made? What paths open up? Who remains silent and who speaks? It's like watching a stage after the curtain falls. There's no more applause, no more rehearsed script, just exposed backstage. And in those backstage moments, we see up close the vulnerability, the mistakes, the desperate attempts at reconstruction. That's when the stories become more human and more dangerous. Because they don't just offer entertainment, they offer reflection. And perhaps that's why these cases never die in the collective memory. They remind us of something we prefer to ignore. Falling can happen to anyone. The difference lies in how each person reacts when the ground disappears. Some disappear, others are reborn. Some become silent, others scream. Some lose everything, others find meaning they never had before. And when we look at these vastly different destinations, we begin to realize there's no formula. There's no surefire path. What exists are choices, mindsets, and decisions that can turn everything upside down in a matter of days. And sometimes it's not even about what you did, but about how you face the weight of what comes next. It is in this clash between silence and reinvention, between fall and return, that the spiral continues to turn. Each story, each revelation, each unexpected fate further deepens the feeling that the show never ends. It simply changes stages. But what happens when they try to start over? What happens to those who have to face it all again? This is where the spiral becomes even more intriguing, because the fall itself is devastating, but the real enigma lies in watching those who dare to return to the stage after being expelled from it. Starting over is not only an act of courage, it's also a dive into a minefield, where each step carries the weight of memories, criticism, and judgments that never completely disappear. Some people think that starting over is simply about getting up and moving forward, as if it were an automatic reboot. But it isn't. Starting over is, in fact, a fight against ghosts no one sees anymore, against memories that return silently in the wee hours of the morning, against the feeling that everything that was built could crumble again. It's in this invisible territory that the greatest battles take place. An emblematic case was that of an artist who, after a scandal, decided to disappear. For years, nothing was heard about her. The media speculated, fans questioned, but silence seemed to be the only answer. Until, suddenly she reappeared. Not in the same form, not with the same brilliance, but with something that seemed even more powerful. A voice shaped by pain, a presence that bore scars but also an unexpected strength. This return divided opinions. Many received it with empathy, as someone who had survived a shipwreck and now bore the marks of the impact on their skin. Others, however, questioned. Was it genuine or just another calculated attempt to manipulate the narrative? This doubt is always inevitable when someone returns after a prolonged silence. The hidden truth rarely reveals itself in its entirety, and perhaps that's precisely what keeps people captivated, watching every gesture, every word, as if searching for clues in a puzzle that never quite completes. The transformation she exhibited wasn't just aesthetic, it was internal. Her way of speaking, her handling of uncomfortable questions, her calm in the face of provocation, all seemed the fruit of a new mindset. She didn't deny the past, but neither did she place it at the center of the narrative. It was as if she had learned to live with the shadows without allowing them to engulf her. And this, paradoxically, made her presence even more magnetic. This kind of fresh start exposes something essential. There is no return without risk. Every appearance, every interview, every project launched becomes an open field of judgment. It's like walking onto a lit stage knowing that half the audience is rooting for your rise and the other half is waiting for your fall. And this invisible tension creates a spectacle in itself. Have you ever noticed how society seems to feed on this cycle? First, it lifts someone to the top, then watches their fall as if it were inevitable, and, when least expected, it follows with fascination the attempt to start over. There's something cruel about this process, but also something that reveals more about us than it does about them. Because, deep down, what we seek is to understand how far a human being can go after losing everything. The revelations that emerge along this path concern not only those involved, but the very structures surrounding them. Behind-the-scenes details that were previously untouchable begin to be exposed. Contracts, alliances, and decisions that seemed impenetrable gain new light. Each detail revealed carries a greater impact than it appears, reminding us that nothing is as solid as it seems. The facade of success can crumble overnight, and what seemed eternal proves fragile in the face of a single wrong choice. And it's precisely this fragility that makes new beginnings so hypnotic. When someone decides to return, they're not just trying to regain ground, they're showing us, even unintentionally, the limits of our own endurance. They're making us think about how many times we've tried to start over on a smaller scale in our own lives. Because if we look closely, every famous new beginning is a distorted mirror of our own attempts to move forward after failure. And herein lies the real provocation. Is this new beginning a real chance for transformation or just a well-constructed disguise for survival? Do the decisions made in this second act reveal authenticity or merely cold strategies to regain ground? The audience never has a definitive answer, and perhaps that's why they continue to watch, fascinated, like someone staring at a flame that never goes out. This dilemma between authenticity and strategy, between real transformation and calculated survival, is what keeps doubt, mystery, and curiosity alive. Because in the end, more than following public trajectories, what we seek is to understand how far the human mind is capable of going when all seems lost. And it is at this crossroads, at this point of collision between past and future, between fall and attempted ascension, that the spiral continues to move, pushing ever deeper the feeling that we are not just facing isolated stories, but something bigger, that connects all those who tried to start over after the collapse. Sometimes, listening to these stories, it's impossible not to feel that they touch something that also lives within us. A forgotten memory. A mistake that never left our minds. A decision that changed everything. And that's why I want to open up a space here, in the silence between one revelation and another. Write in the comments a word that sums up what you feel when you hear stories like this. It could be fall. It could be starting over. It could be something only you understand. This simple gesture isn't just a comment. It's a way of leaving your mark within this narrative, as if each person here were a piece in this mosaic of falls and returns. It's also what keeps this space alive, because each outpouring fuels the continuation of this never-ending story. And as you write, remember, what seems like just a word may actually be the key that connects your hidden truth to that of thousands of others here, reading, reflecting, searching for meaning. Because in the end, we are all part of this same spiral, some falling, others trying to get back up. And it is precisely at this point that the next story begins to take shape, as if each comment were a flame lit in the darkness. It was as if each trajectory left a trail of ash. Some vanish without a trace, others insist on rebuilding what was shattered, and some turn their own collapse into fuel to rise even stronger. It is at this point that the spiral becomes even more disturbing, because there is no single destination for those who fall. There are those who disappear silently, but there are also those who defy the weight of the past and choose to walk again, even knowing that the shadow of the fall never disappears. Think of someone you've seen publicly crumble. An artist, a politician, a businessman. Their downfall made headlines. The exposure seemed definitive. Everyone commented, judged, and declared the end. And yet, years later, the same person returns, now unexpectedly, almost as if reborn from a seemingly impossible wreckage. What few realize is that behind the scenes, decisions are made that never make it to the cameras. Changes in mindset, painful ruptures, intimate revelations that are never told in interviews, but which shape the silent transformation that follows. This new beginning is never clean. It's marked by scars, by a hidden truth that insists on following every step. And, at the same time, there's a collective curiosity in observing how someone can cross an abyss and still return to the surface. This fascinates because it touches on something we all carry, the secret desire to believe that there's always a second chance, even when all seems lost. But is starting over truly a form of redemption, or is it simply survival? This question echoes like a disturbing whisper because the answer is never absolute. Some change careers, seek anonymity, and hide in a low-key life, as if escape were the only way to erase the weight of the past. Others prefer to face public memory, rebuilding their image before the eyes of those who once witnessed their destruction. Each choice has an impact because the decision to reinvent oneself is also an act of courage, but one that exacts a high price. It's at this point that you realize how each fall is also a mirror, not of the one who fell but of us who watch, judge, comment, and then remain silent when they reappear. And perhaps that's why this kind of story is so captivating. Because deep down we're not just looking at someone distant, but at the very fragility of the human condition. Revelations like these reveal that no one is immune to collapse, and that the difference lies only in how each person chooses to react when the ground disappears. So stay with me until the end. Because it's precisely in the conclusion of these trajectories that the most uncomfortable secrets lie hidden. Secrets that reveal not only who they were, but who we are when we watch from the outside, as silent witnesses to falls and new beginnings. As you delve into these destinations, you begin to notice patterns. Look, who they were, what happened, how they reacted, and what remained after the storm. What changes is the intensity, the context, the pain each person chooses to carry. Some see this as a cycle of transformation. Others interpret it as mere survival. The point is, none of these stories ever completely disappears. They linger, provoking reflections that return whenever we hear of a new public fall. And it is on this fragile terrain, between the impact of the past and the choices that shape the future, that the true tension reveals itself. Because each case holds a hidden revelation, something that doesn't appear on the surface. A hidden truth that, when it emerges, changes the way we see both the fallen and ourselves. And it is precisely there that the next curve of this spiral begins, where the line between redemption and survival becomes indistinguishable. As you watch each story unfold, you realize that some aren't limited to the space of a headline or the frenzy of a flash-in-the-pan news story. They span time, cross minds, leaving marks that become references. Names that, at first glance, seemed commonplace have become markers of an era. People whose decisions, collapses, and rebirths shaped cultural debates, altered social perceptions, and made society see itself differently. It wasn't just about what they did or didn't do, but about the psychological impact they carried with them and the effect their stories had on us all. Consider how the world reacts to public failures. The first reaction is almost always shock, followed by silent or explicit judgment. But later, when the dust settles, something deeper emerges: reflection. How can someone navigate chaos and still remain present, even if in a different way? Some rebuild their lives quietly, behind the scenes, shifting mindsets, adjusting strategies, and making decisions that would never be understood by the immediate public. Others use the scandal itself as a springboard, transforming pain into narrative, transformation into example, and each gesture into a lesson for those who observe. These stories become symbols precisely because they touch on universal themes: fear, regret, survival, and the search for redemption. When you realize the intensity of the collapse and compare it to the reconstruction, you realize that each trajectory is a study of humanity at its rawest. There is no formula, no single path. Each person chooses between disappearing forever or facing the hidden truth they carry, and this decision reverberates across all dimensions of their lives and how society reacts to it. Those seemingly small decisions, made away from the spotlight, are often the ones that define the real impact of transformation. And it's fascinating to observe that even in the most iconic figures, there's one constant: the tension between what's public and what remains secret. What you see in the headlines is just the surface. Behind it, there are scenes of pain, moments of doubt, nights when the mind struggles to process what happened, choices made under pressure, and revelations no one else will see. It's this mix of transparency and occultism that creates the enduring fascination. What seemed like just a story about a downfall or scandal becomes a study in mindset, courage, and emotional survival. When we look at cases that have changed society's perception, we see how they instigate cultural and social debates. Complex questions emerge. To what extent does failure define a person? To what extent is reconstruction legitimate or merely a facade? And how does this affect our own perception of success, failure, and redemption? Each iconic example carries symbolic weight, and each narrative of transformation functions as a collective mirror, forcing us to confront our own fears and limitations. It is at this point that history becomes more than just a narrative. It becomes a lens through which we can understand deeper shifts in social mindset. Some who fell and came back shaped generations, creating new patterns of behavior, redefining norms and challenging prejudices. Their trajectory is intertwined with the impact they had outside themselves, because every decision, every gesture, every silence carries a weight that transcends the individual and reverberates culturally. And even when we try to dissociate what happened from the person, we can't escape the magnetism of their narrative. The revelations about their choices, about what happened behind the scenes, continue to provoke curiosity, debate, and reflection. They show that transformation isn't linear, that impact isn't measured solely by what's visible, and that the hidden truth can be more powerful than any public version. How some people, even after seemingly definitive scandals, manage not only to survive but to become symbols of profound transformation. It is at this point that the cycle of breakdowns and new beginnings intertwines with cultural and social debates, showing that, no matter how hard we try to understand, each story holds a complexity that continues to reverberate, waiting to be explored in its smallest details. The figures who defined eras are not just isolated examples. They connect to a larger narrative about choices, consequences, and the effect our decisions have on others. And it is in this space of tension between what was public and what remains hidden, that true immersion begins, leading us to question not only what happened, but the impact these silent trajectories continue to have on us and the world around us. The pace of history never slows, the spiral continues to turn, and at every moment, something new reveals itself, ready to challenge what we thought we knew about fall, redemption, and transformation. Silence, at this point, is not just the absence of sound. It is presence. A heavy, almost tangible presence that weighs on the consciousness of those who observe and do not understand. Some of these individuals seem to have evaporated from the world, but what we see is only the surface. Behind the scenes, behind closed doors and drawn curtains, decisions are being made, hidden truths are being processed, and a mentality that shapes itself to its own shadow. People who choose isolation did not disappear by chance. There is a silent calculation, an intimate strategy of protection, of reconstruction, or simply of emotional survival. They live on the threshold between what is public and what remains forever secret. And in this limbo, every gesture, every movement is charged with meaning, even if no one else notices. Have you ever wondered what drives someone to sever all ties with the world they once knew? It's not just shame, nor just fear, though both can be present. It's also the weight of exposure, the feeling that every detail of their life will be interpreted, judged, used as a weapon. In this context, the decision to disappear is, paradoxically, a way of taking control. Controlling what is revealed and what remains hidden, manipulating the invisible narrative that defines who they truly are outside the lens of society. The impact of this goes far beyond the isolated person. It reverberates in those left behind, in those awaiting answers, in those trying to reconstruct their own perception of the world from fragments of information that slipped through their fingers. And while the world continues to judge, these stories continue to exist as enigmas. Limbo creates a subtle tension. It's impossible to completely forget, but impossible to fully understand. Every decision made in silence is a silent revelation of character, resilience, and sometimes profound pain. The hidden truth, in this context, becomes more powerful than any public declaration, because it challenges our need for easy answers and forces us to grapple with the discomfort of ambiguity. There's a magnetism in observing someone who refuses to explain themselves, an inescapable curiosity about what brought them there, and how their lives continue to unfold beyond our eyes. Within this state of limbo, each choice is a small personal revolution. Some reinvent their own identity, others surrender to contemplation and accept that the world will never fully understand their decisions. The transformation happens silently, and its impact, though invisible, is profound. Each memory of public exposure, each decision to withdraw, each revelation that never happened, shapes not only the individual trajectory but also society's expectations, challenging our understanding of scandals, breakdowns, and redemption. Can you imagine the weight of a lifetime lived in the shadows, where every thought is a secret backstage, every gesture calculated to avoid exposure, and every memory fragmented between what is remembered and what is purposefully hidden? It is in this limbo that the most profound stories are found, those that offer neither comfort nor definitive answers, but that carry subtle lessons about resilience, mental strategy, and self-perception in the eyes of others. The tension comes not from what we know, but from what we will never know for sure, and it is this lack of conclusion that keeps these stories alive, even in apparent oblivion. And yet, even in silence, these lives continue to make an impact. Each choice to walk away triggers an invisible chain reaction. Friends, family, admirers, critics, all grappling with the absence of explanations, trying to fill gaps, interpreting signs and fragments. Limbo transforms the space between the public and the individual into a territory of mystery, where each partial revelation, each discrete gesture, creates a narrative that is at once personal and universal. Tension grows not because of spectacular events, but because of the density of absence, the weight of unexplained decisions, and the complexity of those who refuse to be fully known. And it is at this point that we realize that disappearing is not necessarily synonymous with oblivion. Those who live in this state of limbo continue to exist, influence, transform, and challenge. Their silent stories function as mirrors reflecting our own doubts, regrets, and desires for control. Every choice, every retreat from the public, every fragment of hidden life serves as a reminder that not all battles are fought under bright lights, nor do all truths demand to be proclaimed. The tension remains, breathing between what is known and what is deliberately kept out of reach, leading us naturally to the next layer of stories, where silence and absence become forces as powerful as any visible scandal. And as you feel this atmosphere, you realize that limbo is not just a space of waiting, but an invisible stage of transformation. Every story, every decision, every gesture of strategic withdrawal carries with it an emotional weight, a silent impact, a revelation that, even unspoken, shapes perspectives, challenges certainties, and keeps curiosity alive. The choices of those who withdraw from the world reflect a complex mindset, and understanding limbo is realizing that absence is often the most intense form of presence. And it is in this space between silence and perception that we prepare to delve even deeper, exploring untold trajectories and decisions that continue to resonate, even when no one is looking. The day it all ended seemed ordinary, almost banal. Nothing suggested that moment would carry so much weight, that every gesture, every breath, would be the mark of an irreversible decision. The people around continued their routines, unaware that there, at that specific point, someone was closing entire chapters of their life silently, invisibly. There was no dramatic scene, no shouting or confrontation. Only emptiness, which spread subtly, filling spaces previously occupied by presence, energy, and expectation. It is in this vacuum that we realize how the impact of extreme choices doesn't depend on spectacle. It is the silence that amplifies intensity, that transforms an absence into something almost palpable, almost suffocating. The emptiness that remains demands no explanation. It doesn't wait to be understood, it doesn't bow to questions. Yet it confronts us, forces us to face our own fragility in the face of human decisions, confronts us with questions that will never have easy answers. Those who observe it feel a mixture of shock and helplessness, as if the world had suddenly been shut off, and all light, even if only metaphorical, had been sucked into a distant point. It's the kind of moment that alters our perception of reality, that transforms the everyday into something fragile, ephemeral, and makes us question our own choices, our own mindsets, and the speed with which life can change. Have you ever experienced something like this, even in a small way? A sense of abrupt ending, of doors closing without warning, of escape routes disappearing before your eyes? This is precisely the feeling that accompanies cases like this, where the ending happens on the very day with no room for negotiation, no possibility of reversal. The transformation is not gradual, it is sudden, and its impact reverberates in unexpected ways. The repercussions are not only emotional but also social and cultural. Friends, family, colleagues, close strangers, all absorb fragments of a hidden truth, each interpreting it in their own way, often trying to fill in gaps that are impossible to fill. And there's something even deeper to this, the realization that someone's life can end so silently, yet still leave traces. Not physical traces, but traces of impact, of unanswered questions, of reflections that remain invisible yet indelible. Every action, or lack thereof, becomes an involuntary lesson, a persistent memory, a mirror of decisions we are all forced to face at some point. The background to these choices is dense, almost inaccessible, but their effect is felt in every glance, in every shared silence, in every memory that insists on not being erased. What fascinates and terrifies us at once is the simplicity of this final gesture. There's no media manipulation, no control over external narratives. There's only the raw truth of someone who's decided to close a chapter completely. It's the contrast between the swiftness of the act and the depth of its consequences that creates tension, keeping us curious and restless. Each case closed on the same day challenges our understanding of time, causality, and emotional impact. It forces us to reflect on choices, on mindset, on how decisive every second is, and how life, even in the hands of someone seemingly ordinary, can transform into an intense, dramatic, and definitive narrative. And as we reflect on this, we realize there are hidden layers to every decision. There are reasons that will never be told, fears that will never be verbalized, pain that can only be felt. There is a hidden truth, an invisible thread connecting actions to the emptiness that follows, revealing that absence in itself is a form of expression. The impact is not measured by the noise someone makes before disappearing, but by the emotional density that silence leaves behind, by its ability to transform other people's memories and make each observer feel the weight of a life that decided to walk away before the world could react. Even in the abrupt conclusion of a day, there is a strange form of continuity. Absence speaks, the scenes breathe, and each fragment of the story remains pulsing in the memory of those who witnessed it, even indirectly. Reactions arise, interpretations multiply, and every seemingly insignificant detail becomes part of a larger mosaic, a web of consequences that defies logic and chronology. The decision to end everything so quickly is, paradoxically, the beginning of an invisible narrative that will continue to shape perceptions, create tension, and keep curiosity alive, while we still prepare to understand deeper layers, silent revelations waiting to be discovered. And it is at this point that the impact becomes inevitable. Silence becomes the protagonist, emptiness is more expressive than any word, and each decision, however brief, reveals something essential about humanity, transformation, choices, and consequences. One day can be enough to forever alter the course of a story, and even if no one sees it, the echo of that decision continues to propagate, subtle, constant, as a reminder and a warning, preparing the ground for the next chapters that await in silence, charged with tension, mystery, and truths yet to be revealed. And as you feel the weight of this story, you might wonder, how many truths remain hidden, waiting to be discovered? How many paths close before anyone even notices? If you're here, following every detail, every silence, it's because you're searching for something beyond the obvious, something not found in the headlines or the spotlight. It's this attentive gaze, this restless curiosity, that keeps alive the narrative of the forgotten, the disappeared, those who chose silence. And that's precisely why what follows needs to be seen by those who truly want to understand. Because stories don't reveal themselves by chance. They demand attention, presence, a desire to delve into what's hidden. So stay with me until the end. Stay with me until the end, not as a command, but as an invitation. To feel, to question, to traverse each layer of mystery and pain that we will still explore together. If you subscribe now, it's not just to receive videos, it's to become part of something bigger, a community of attentive observers, of curious people who don't just accept the surface. Your presence allows these narratives to continue, allowing the secrets, the behind the scenes, the hidden truths to continue to be unveiled, one layer at a time. It's a silent but powerful commitment. Those who follow closely, those who engage, help keep alive the investigation, the intensity, the emotional impact that each story carries. Imagine what we'll still discover: faces lost to memory, decisions that changed destinies, silences that speak louder than words. Each video is a bridge to something greater, and each subscription is a gesture of trust, of connection, of belonging. It's not just about watching, it's about being part of what's yet to be revealed. The story doesn't end here, nor could it. Each step forward depends on those willing to follow me, to explore what lurks in the shadows and feel the weight of each choice, each revelation. So, if you want to continue, if you want to witness what no one else dares to show, if you want to feel the chill of hidden truth and the silent impact of irreversible decisions, sign up. Do this not out of obligation but out of curiosity, out of a desire to belong to a space where the intensity of stories is respected and shared. Here, every mystery, every twist, every revealed secret becomes even more powerful because you are there. Stay with me until the end. Because what follows isn't just a continuation, it's an escalation in tension, a deeper dive into the backstage of the mind, life, and what the world prefers to forget. Every detail matters, every fragment is essential, and the journey isn't complete without you. Subscribe and be part of something that defies time, that provokes reflection, that transforms the simple act of watching into an intense and authentic experience. Now, as we breathe together the weight of this silence, feel that there are still layers to unfold, that there are still stories that need to be heard, that every shadow holds secrets that only those who remain until the end will be able to perceive. And it is at this point that your choice becomes decisive, to follow or simply pass on. Here, every presence counts, every attentive gaze keeps alive the narrative that is only beginning to reveal its depths. Stay with me until the end because this is how these stories survive, grow, and find those who truly want to understand them. Looking at these recent stories, you begin to realize that not all falls are definitive. Some individuals who might have been lost in an invisible abyss found unexpected strength, sometimes from someone who believed in them, sometimes from a silent decision to allow themselves to start over. It's curious how the impact of a gesture, a word, a watchful eye, can completely alter the trajectory of someone who seemed doomed to collapse. These narratives aren't just about danger or a fall. They're about the silent transformation that happens behind the scenes, away from the spotlight and headlines, where the hidden truth finds its space to emerge, almost imperceptible but powerful. You realize that each story carries a decision, a moment of choice that defines the next chapter. A choice that often goes unnoticed by anyone other than the individual themselves. And yet, it reverberates, changes mindsets, creates new opportunities, and impacts not only the lives of those who made it, but also those who observe, those who learn, and those who identify. There's a strange beauty in this process, the awareness that the path isn't linear, that collapse doesn't have to be definitive, and that silence often holds deeper lessons than any public account. And that's precisely where the core of what I want you to feel now lies. The difference between succumbing and resisting isn't just physical or social, but emotional, psychological, almost spiritual. Some of these recent cases show that someone's presence, the act of trusting or offering support, can create an invisible bridge over the precipice. Can you imagine the weight of these decisions? The silent responsibility of intervening, of offering a chance, of becoming an anchor for someone struggling not to disappear completely? It's a profound impact, almost imperceptible, but one that unfolds in every gesture, in every word, in every choice to start over. These stories also reveal something we rarely see in the spotlight: the behind-the-scenes story of suffering and redemption. How certain people manage, almost invisibly, to rebuild their lives, change their mindset, and find balance even when the world seems to have abandoned all interest in them. It's a delicate dance between courage and vulnerability, between the decision to walk away or reinvent oneself. And each small step is charged with meaning. Each attempt at a new beginning is a silent battle, where victory is measured not by applause, but by survival and internal transformation. By observing these cases, you also realize how society's perception of these people changes according to what is revealed and what is hidden. There is a hidden truth in each trajectory, a layer of experiences that will never be fully revealed but that definitively shapes the narrative. Some achieve redemption, others merely survive, but all carry a silent legacy that teaches, provokes, challenges, and above all, keeps alive the complexity of the human experience. And what makes it all even more fascinating is the unpredictability of the twists and turns. Some who were on the verge of disappearing find unexpected opportunities, while others who seemed unbeatable collapse in surprising ways. It's a cruel and honest reminder that life rarely follows a predictable script. Every decision, every choice, every act of courage or hesitation, alters the course of destiny irreversibly. Transformation doesn't happen linearly, and it's precisely this suspense, this uncertainty that keeps the tension alive, that piques curiosity and keeps attention sharp. Can you sense how these stories, though recent, echo ancient lessons about resilience, impact, and silent choices? They are symbols of hope and warning simultaneously, reminding us that the path is made of fragile moments, small interactions, and seemingly insignificant decisions that can generate profound and lasting effects. And yet, each path remains open, each life fertile ground for new twists and turns, for revelations yet to be told, for truths that remain hidden, waiting for the right moment to emerge. And it is precisely this sense of continuity and possibility that keeps us alert, that makes us wonder, what if the next choice, the next word, the next gesture could alter someone's destiny forever? This is the essence of what we are exploring, the invisible thread that connects all these recent cases, the fine line between collapse and new beginning, between silence and expression, between disappearance and transformation. Stories that remind us that there is always a chance to turn the page, that there is always a possible impact, that decisions, even small ones, carry with them the power of an entire world of possibilities yet to be revealed. And so, as you absorb every detail of these changing lives, every behind-the-scenes glimpse, every fragment of hidden truth, it's impossible not to feel there's still more to be discovered, more layers to be explored, more moments of tension and insight waiting patiently to unfold. The journey doesn't end here. It only deepens, taking us to territories where the perception of reality merges with the need to understand what truly defines survival, choice, and redemption, always keeping alive the silent anticipation that something even more impactful is yet to come. And so, we return to the question that lingers over every story we've experienced so far. But after all, what happens after the fall? It's a question that echoes silently, like the wind blowing through empty corridors, like the clock marking time in a place where no one cares to observe. You can feel the tension in the air, the anticipation of the invisible, the feeling that something always lurks, even when the lights go out and the spotlight recedes. Each case, each trajectory, each gesture of courage or surrender, leaves behind subtle traces, marks that are not visible at first glance, but which carry impact, transformation, revelations that remain hidden from the eyes of most. It's curious how these recent stories of prevention and new beginnings contrast with the cases closed the same day, with those lost in limbo or that became cultural symbols. Everything seems connected by an invisible, almost imperceptible thread, reminding us that life is not linear and that what we see on the surface rarely reveals the complexity of what goes on inside. Choices, no matter how small, carry profound consequences. Silent decisions become milestones of transformation and revelations that are often only realized over time. And that's where the inevitable reflection arises. Every trajectory, every destination, every collapse and new beginning, even if partially visible, contains hidden truths, behind-the-scenes details that no one will ever fully witness. The impact of these lives, of silent falls and unexpected resilience, spreads in an almost ethereal way, altering perceptions and mindsets, raising questions that may not have definitive answers. Have you ever felt this? The feeling that something important is being told, but still hidden between the lines, that still provokes us to look more closely, to search, to reflect. As you follow these narratives, you realize that what fascinates us is not just the drama, but the space between the fall and the rebuilding, between visibility and silence. It is in this interval that transformation occurs, that the mind adjusts, that life reinvents itself, that hidden truth finds ways to reveal itself. Some start over successfully, others merely survive, but all leave us with signs, fragments of experiences that speak of decisions, impacts, and the power to move forward despite what seemed impossible. And amidst this complex web of events, a disturbing realization emerges. Perhaps none of these stories truly have an ending. Each one lives on in some way, in choices not made, in silences held, in future actions yet to occur. The sensation is of walking through corridors where history breathes on its own, where the echoes of past decisions mingle with the promise of future revelations. Every detail, every gesture, every change of direction carries with it a silent force, capable of altering perceptions and impacting not only the protagonists, but all who observe, reflect, and feel. And it is at this point that the mystery intensifies. You realize that even the clearest cases, the most apparent new beginnings, the most successful preventions, maintain a layer of uncertainty. The hidden truth remains there in the shadows, behind the scenes, waiting to be unveiled. There is a persistent, almost palpable energy that compels us to continue investigating, to delve deeper, to question what it truly means to survive, to transform, to begin again. And this same energy leads us to realize that every collapse, every twist, every silence, is an invitation to reflect on ourselves, on our choices, on the fragility and strength that coexist within each decision. Perhaps it's precisely this lack of answers that captivates us, that provokes us, that transforms each story into a living fragment of a larger puzzle. Every narrative we've experienced so far has left us with subtle marks, trails of learning, clues about mindset, signs about the impact of seemingly trivial decisions that can redefine lives. It's a silent invitation to look beyond the obvious, to realize that stories don't end with headlines or scandals, but continue in less visible forms, in echoes of transformation that remain alive. And just when you think you understand, that you can predict the next move, the most disturbing realization of all emerges. Perhaps the most disturbing thing is realizing that none of these stories are truly over. The decisions remain, the impacts reverberate, the hidden truths await the right moment to emerge. Every trajectory we study, every person who has faced a fall, a collapse, or a new beginning, leaves us on the brink of a silent abyss, reminding us that what seems over is, in fact, just an initial layer, a prelude to something yet to come. It is in this space that curiosity is ignited, reflection deepens, and the narrative lives on, breathing in the shadows, carrying with us the uncomfortable and fascinating feeling that nothing truly ends. If you've made it this far, you know that not just any story matters. Every detail, every silence we've experienced together, was designed for you to feel, reflect, and recognize yourself in something greater. So, stay with me for a moment longer. Leave the phrase, "I'm with you until the end" in the comments. It's a small gesture, but it conveys all the intensity of what we experienced in this video. It's as if you're registering that you were here, that you shared this plunge into the unexpected, and at the same time strengthening our community, a silent current of those who seek to see beyond the obvious. If during this time you felt the tension, the curiosity, the sensation of going behind the scenes of destinations no one dares to tell, leave a like. It's a simple act, but it keeps the narrative we've created together alive, ensuring we can continue bringing stories like this, which challenge perception and reveal hidden truths, impacting those who truly want to see deeper. And for those who feel like it doesn't end here, there's a video that complements this universe of transformations, choices, and revelations we've begun to explore. There's something there you need to see, something that will stir the same layers of unease and reflection we've explored together now. Click and stay with me there, because these stories never end, and each piece we discover together brings us closer to answers no one else dares to tell. What you'll find there is the continuation of a journey that began in this video. It's the next step for those who want to understand the impact, the behind the scenes, and the hidden truth that hides behind every fall, every new beginning, every silence. So, subscribe, comment, like, and dive with me into the next layer. Because ultimately, being here is being part of something that never ends. It's connecting with those who don't conform to what appears on the surface, and those who follow through always find more than they bargained for. Let's go together.